Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fieros with Tri-City Equity Group. Today, we have Cale Delaney on the show. Cale is a real estate entrepreneur. He's an investor. He's a husband, a father of three. He was just picking up one of his kids, I know. And after starting in real estate as a commercial broker, he's transitioned more to the residential side. He's grown his real estate portfolio from an initial start of 300 grand to, let's say, over 6 million in less than 2 years. And you'll have to update us on some of the numbers too, because I'm pretty sure that's probably not accurate anymore. He manages multiple short-term rentals in the Smoky Mountains. He's a published author. He's been featured on Bigger Pockets and since launched his own podcast called The Fit Investor. And he's going to share his journey with us today. Cale, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, glad to have you on. I know you've done a ton of things in a relatively short period of time. So excited to kind of dive into your journey and share with our listeners your story and you know, how that might be relevant to them and maybe give them some inspiration in this time in the market. So, but yeah, give us some background. How did you get going in real estate? And did you come from a long history of vacation rental operators and you just walked into a sizable portfolio, or how did that work?
I wish, right? That would have made it a lot easier. No, not at all. So I kind of off the cuff call myself the accidental intentional entrepreneur because I was one of those people that I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur or have my own business or that type of thing. I mean, I was drinking the Kool-Aid of what society tells you of go to college, get the job, invest in your 401k and IRA and hope to retire one day. I worked, well, I guess to back it up real quick. So I went to college for engineering, and during my time at university, I decided I really didn't want to do that for a profession. Like I enjoyed it academically. It was great, but the actual work, design engineering was just not really appealing to me. So I took a completely different route and started working for a commercial real estate investment brokerage firm down in Miami, Florida. And it was purely a thing of, and this was 2006. So still kind of 2005. So still kind of like right in the peak of the market. And so I was just hearing people in real estate make money. I was like, hey, let me just do that. Let me try this. And well, of course, that was right at the peak and into the downward trend. So it was not quite what I had envisioned. Great experience. I learned a lot, but I was too young to really know what to do with the knowledge. I mean, looking back, I was like, man, I was networking with so many investors and stuff at that point that I probably could have done something, but not whatever. I was 22 years old. So 2008, when the market dried up, I left that and got into construction management, which was just kind of the next logical thing for me to do with my degree without doing design engineering. And I ended up in that world for 15 years, ultimately ending up as a senior project manager for a large specialty contractor and doing multi-million-dollar projects and stuff across the country. But it was just a job that on paper was a great career. I mean, it really was great company and all that stuff, but it was just very, very stressful, long hours, especially before COVID. I was driving a lot and it was just not a great fit for me. And just dealing with a lot of these different personalities and condo boards and that type of thing it was not a fun job. Let's put it that way. It was not a fun job. And so end of 2019, my youngest son was born. And that was really the pivotal point for me in kind of having almost midlife crisis at that point of thinking, I want to be able to spend time with him, see him grow up. I don't want to be stuck to a cubicle all day long, because my life was basically leave the house around 6:30, 7 a.m. and get back around the same time in the evening, right? And then it's quick dinner, bedtime, that type of thing. And it was just not a great lifestyle, not great balance. So I just started thinking of what can I do? Like, I got to get out of this. I got to find a way to get out. And so I just started thinking about it, started praying about it a lot, and kind of happened across real estate again. It was kind of the only thing in the back of my mind that I could really think of again, hey, people in real estate are usually wealthy. Maybe that's what I should look into. So I started reading a lot of books, podcasts, found Rich Dad, Poor Dad, read that. And that was kind of the solidifying thing, right? Like I think it is for a lot of people. I read that book and it was like a smack in the face of, okay, that's what you need to do. You need to start investing and you need to have a business. And so from there, I just kind of made that decision and made the commitment that, okay, real estate's how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to break free, get that time and financial freedom. Let's just go down that path. And so I thought it was going to be through long-term rentals, small multifamily. And I set myself a 5-year goal. And that I thought that was pretty aggressive to be able to replace my income, which was a pretty decent income, replace my income within 5 years through small multifamily. And so I started out in that, bought my first property, which was a cottage in a local market here in South Florida. And it was a pain in the butt, and quickly realized that the cash flow is not that great, and it's going to take a lot of properties to get me to where I wanted to be. And that 5-year goal started looking a little bit more difficult. And so I, again, just kind of submit things to prayer and doing my due diligence and research. And again, just back to books and podcasts and that type of thing. And through another podcast, stumbled upon short-term rentals and the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, which is the market that I primarily invest in. And it sounded great, what I heard. So this was actually the week before Thanksgiving in 2020. And so a couple of days later, we packed up the minivan, drove 17 hours out to the Smoky Mountains, and met with some realtors, looked at some properties, came back. And it was a difficult thing for me because as the Smoky Mountains is a very expensive market. And I am a very...
This is what year that you were looking?
So this is 2020, the very end of 2020 right now.
Okay. Yeah. You're already seeing a run up for sure in pricing. Yeah.
Yeah. And at that time, the market was on fire. Things were within 1 to 2 days. They had a dozen offers. They were selling for 30% over asking. And it was just this crazy bidding war for every single property. And it was just nuts. And I'm a very frugal guy, like very frugal. And just the thought of overpaying for something, or not necessarily overpaying, but paying more than asking is just like totally against my being. And so I remember just on the drive back, I was just thinking, I was like, man, like I'm sold on the idea. I'm sold on the market, but I just can't get past this having to pay more. And number one, it sounds extremely expensive to begin with. And it's like, I struggled with that for that long drive home. And yeah, I really prayed about it a lot. And I happened to come across a property, and this was kind of my strategy that I've used really since then. I started looking at properties that sat on the market for a while, because I was like, you know what? I'm not going to get into those bidding wars. Like I'm just not going to do it. So let me take a look at the stuff that other people have tossed aside and whatever. So I came across this one property. It looked great. Had my realtor check it out. He said, wow, that looks great. Like, I don't know why it's not sold. So I was like, okay, but let me pray about it. So I sat on it for another week or so, just praying. And I was like, God, if this is the property, if this is the path, then make it happen. If it's not, then don't let it happen, but don't let me be discouraged. Help me move on to the next thing. And so I let it sit, knowing that it could be gone at any second. It was a miracle that it was already there. And after that time, I submitted an offer below asking, like another thing going against the grain, and they accepted. And I was like, holy cow. Okay. I guess we're doing this thing. And so that was all within like a period of 3 weeks to a month from hearing that podcast, driving out there, then going under contract on this property that was way more expensive than I ever thought I'd pay. And bought it, closed in January 2021. The seller owned the 2 next door properties that they wanted to sell. So we immediately negotiated and went under contract on the next 2 properties and closed on those. And then fast forward, so basically over 18 months or so from getting started in short-term rentals, we built up the portfolio to 7 cabins out there, a few properties in South Florida, and we've added a few more since then. So now it's around 7 million or so that we built the portfolio up. But so we move fast. I kind of dove all in, move fast, and that's kind of the genesis of how it all started, though.
That's awesome. And there's a lot to kind of dive into there, even just kind of the start for your journey there. Couple of things I'll just touch on real quick. For one, and none of us can predict this, right? None of us have crystal ball. Like nobody can predict timing of the market and all that kind of stuff. But you saw the opportunity. You wouldn't have had the opportunity, let's say, to even buy those first 3, because it's like, well, you went for one, but it happened to be the one that you went for that you ended up getting an additional 2, right? And to find a seller that had those properties, right, was familiar with you, and okay, cool, yeah, like this guy closed, this guy performed, and bam, you got an instant portfolio, and at a booming time in the market. Those high water marks, right, like for being in the industry. So I'm sure that catapulted you into like income wise, equity wise, right? And then obviously you were able to parlay that into some additional purchases. It sounds like just being able to grow your portfolio size that quick. So kudos to you, man, for jumping in. Because for one, a few different things there, right? Like from what I'm listening to, even your story, it's like, okay, a few times already in your life, in your career, you're having to kind of break some traditional beliefs. Breaking that traditional belief of, okay, well, hey, I just got to work a W-2 for the next 30 years, go the traditional route, work a job that I either I hate or it doesn't bring me joy. There's no life necessarily there. It pays the bills, of course, but it's not something like, hey, I'm super excited to come and deliver value to you today, right? And to all the clients and whatnot. So that's already kind of one traditional belief broke, but you tried, right?
Right.
You started there, you move forward, that got you some momentum. And then the same thing with the long-term rentals, right? Like, okay, well, hey, I'm going to go this traditional route again, right?
Right.
Like this is tried and true. There is some value here, of course. I don't know if you still own your Florida property, but I'm sure it's worth more today than when you probably first bought it. But it's like, okay, well, let me challenge that belief too, because maybe this isn't the only way to do this. Let me explore short term, right? People are having some success. Okay, I'm going to try a different route. But this is something I kind of want to get our listeners across. And this is a common thread, I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs and business, real estate investors and people in business. It's like fastest to failure, right? Like, okay, we need to get out there. We need to get things going. You're not going to find what works or what doesn't work if you're not trying. You have to be out there and you have to be willing to push back and challenge the status quo in kind of traditional thinking sometimes in order to find a success, right? I wish I could tell you guys that, and I'm sure Cale would probably express the same thing. Hey, you know what? The first time I tried anything, that was the home run. That was the magic sauce, man, Midas touch, and we're good to go. And that was it. I don't need to do anything else. I'm sure some of our listeners, maybe that's the case, but I know for me personally, that hasn't been how it's worked. I had to try my hand at a number of different things, a number of different strategies to find the right fit. And kudos to you too because it sounds like you've got your family and they have to be kind of a part of what's going on as well, right? They need to be in tune with what's happening as well. So you had to get them on board. So you did some sales jobs there too.
Yeah.
Now, obviously you picked that market into the Smoky. Smoky's obviously a great market. How did you decide on that market? Was that solely from just podcasts or how did you determine that?
Yeah. I think you probably heard the phrase before, success leaves clues. And that's really all it was, just following the success of other people. And I like to think I'm a smart guy, but I'm not the most inventive of people. So I'm more than happy to follow or stand on the shoulders of other people and follow proven things that work versus being the one trying to kind of blaze a path. And that's really what it was. I mean, I heard the numbers, I heard about the market. It all sounded great. Going out there in person and meeting with my realtor and looking at some properties helped solidify that vision. And I, of course, did a little bit of research, but it was, like I said, it was a pretty fast-paced thing between hearing about it, going out there, and then going under contract on the first property. But just within that period, it seemed like a safe bet. I mean, the more I looked into it, it was like, okay, everybody, you hear about the Smokies market or Smoky Mountains when you hear vacation rentals. Smokies is like one of the top markets. It's been vacation rental for the past 50, 60 years. Like,
right,
when it comes to a market that has very little risk of deregulation or regulation or any of those types of things, I felt pretty confident on it. The numbers I had no clue on. I mean, it was really a trust and a faith thing, going with what my realtor was telling me and praying to God that it was accurate. And so, I mean, at some point though, that's what you got to do. You got to take that leap of faith, right? You got to just get into the game. And if it works out, awesome. I mean, and I'm very conservative as well in my underwriting and that type of thing. And I encourage others to be conservative, but if it works out, awesome. If it doesn't, don't invest, number one, with your life savings. I would probably not encourage that either. But if it doesn't work out, then it's not the end of the world and you move on and pick yourself up and move on, hopefully. So yeah, it was definitely a leap of faith and taking that, going under contract and just putting myself out there. And then, of course, once you get that first one under the belt, I think everyone kind of has that same experience. Like, it's really scary. You're going into the unknown. But once you get that first one under the belt, like, you kind of see that it's not as scary as you think. And that, hey, yeah, okay, I can do this. And then it just helps you really get that momentum and kind of steamroll forward.
Oh, for sure. Right. Yeah. It's like anything else, right? It just takes seeing it, takes doing it. And I know a lot of people, I'm in Hawaii, right? Like, so buying outside of your own backyard, like, it's really mind bending for a lot of people, especially
Right.
for people that haven't like traveled outside of Hawaii, which it's a sizable amount. But it's, again, you're not going to get comfortable doing it until you start doing it. Right? Like, at some point you need to take that first step. So,
Yep.
and you and I just share that component about having kind of that faith aspect of it too. And so relying on God to kind of open the door, pave the path, and we just need to move forward, kind of take
Yeah.
that step of faith.
Yeah, just kind of reiterate what I had mentioned before, is that was my big prayer, right? It was, this sounds good. This sounds good, everything I'm seeing. And I hope it is. Like, I really hope this is the direction, because I kind of want that. But if it's not, then don't let it happen. But that second part was, please don't let me be discouraged. Don't let me feel like a failure. Help me pick myself up and move on to the next thing. Right. And I think that's critical. You have that kind of mentality. And if you are a person of faith, of course, submit that to God for prayer. But if things don't work out on your first investment, that doesn't mean that you're a failure. That doesn't mean that you should give it up. Right. So many successful people have had a series of failures before they became successful. It's a hard thing in our society to really understand that until you kind of go through it. So I just encourage people to don't get down or too down on yourself, pick yourself back up if you do run into a situation like that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's honestly, this has been something that I've learned through countless episodes now, recording with so many people who are incredibly talented, incredibly experienced, incredibly successful. It's usually that. It's usually like they're just not afraid to fail. Because again, I can't help but to think of, I've got two young daughters, and it's like, okay, well, hey, they all had to learn to walk at some point.
Right.
Well, guess what? If you're afraid to fail, you never even take the first step.
Yeah.
So what does that lead to? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I know that you could potentially be an Olympic athlete, pole vaulter or something. But if you're not even willing to take the first step, then guess what? You'll never start on that journey. You'll never realize what could be. Right. So just an encouragement to the listeners, like, just take that first step. It may not be perfect. It's going to be ugly probably. But that's a part of the journey. That's a part of life.
Yep.
I want to switch gears a little bit to just even like current day, right? Like, obviously got a little bit of a volatile market, and we've been in that for a while now too. Are you still being aggressive, let's say, in acquisitions? I even want to know too. I mean, we see so many videos about Airbnb bust and just strategies about how that's affected, let's say, operations for you. Have you had to pivot and kind of adjust? Good that you've been through a couple of market cycles. I like to hear that you started before the GFC, and so did I. But a lot of people don't see market cycles like that, and they don't understand a lot of this. It's this number, right? It's all cyclical. So how are you kind of navigating those waters now? Are you still buying, or are you adjusting operations? Like, what are you having to do now?
Yeah. I am still buying, not as aggressively, but I did just close on 2 more a couple months ago. And I like to say I'm an opportunist at this point. I'm not as actively looking, but I'm always open to opportunities if they come by. But yeah, I guess to answer the first part, I'm at this stage where I'm at right now, since I did scale really, really quickly those first couple of years. Honestly, it's a little bit of kind of catching up now with myself on the back end of things. I think that's a struggle that a lot of entrepreneurs go through, especially when you do move fast and that you're in that growth mode in the beginning, is you kind of neglect a lot of things on the back end. And so this year, and especially it's been a transitional year for me too, in that I left my W-2 at the end of last year. So it's been the first year of being full-time in real estate and kind of seeing everything that goes into that now, and being my own boss, for better or worse. And then, like I said, kind of trying to get the back end things caught up a bit and streamline operations a little bit more. So that's what this year has been. And I'm still trying to figure it out and really get things well oiled. But yeah, it's been a real transitional year of just sorting things out, getting caught up. But like I said, I did acquire a couple more this year, and I'm still open to opportunities as they come, but definitely not as aggressive as I was. For people looking at the market, I still believe that it's a fine time to buy. I just think it takes a lot more patience now. Even though when I was doing in the very beginning, when I was buying things, and then even through 2022, things were still moving along relatively quickly, but market was on fire. But I think it was even a little bit easier to find deals then. I think there was a lot more supply, and you just had to be really diligent. And like I told you, I kind of used what I call the stale listing strategy, looking at properties that had kind of fallen out of the limelight. And for me, that worked. I mean, every single time, honestly, like every single one of my properties was kind of using that same strategy, and it worked out great. Now I think it's definitely a bit harder to find the deals. So interest rates, of course, have gone up. So the cost of capital is way up, and prices have gone up still. So the numbers are not panning out quite the way they were before. There definitely is more negotiation in the market now, but the delta between, I think, seller expectations and buyer necessities as an investor, there's still a pretty big delta there. So that's why I say it just takes a lot more patience. I definitely think you can still find deals out there without a doubt. But if you're looking to lock on to something right away, depending on the market, of course, but it's probably not going to happen. Be conservative, be diligent, and be patient. In terms of the like Airbnb or short-term rental specific market and how that's adjusting and changing, it definitely is changing from the past couple of years. But this, I don't know what you want to call it, theory or rumor of this Airbnb bust, so to speak, frankly, is not accurate. And if you actually if anybody does want to take the time, just go on Google and Google AirDNA, Airbnb bust, and you'll come up with some articles. But AirDNA, they're one of the leading data resources for the short-term rental industry. And they put out a series of figures and commentaries and articles on this quote unquote Airbnb bust, basically debunked it. Right. And ultimately what they said was, look, yeah, things are changing from 2021 and 2022. Like those years were in 2020, those years were anomalies, right? Just like a lot of things were anomalies because of the whole COVID deal and all the after effects of that. So yes, things are normalizing, I think is the best way to kind of put things. Things are normalizing. But if you compared the data to the 2018, 2019, and even the 2020 numbers, we're still on a very strong path upward. And I think at the end of the day, their data was showing that even compared to 2022, the 2023 year numbers were basically more or less kind of flat in terms of revenue growth, which frankly is a big win for the industry, I think, because we had these huge gains for really years, 2020 to 2022. And for a normalizing year to be flat and not experience a significant decline is a pretty darn big success. And frankly, that's what I've seen with my portfolio overall, is that my revenue across the portfolio, 2023 to 2022, is basically flat. I've had lower rates, ADRs or daily rates, but higher occupancy. And overall, a flat revenue across the portfolio. So I don't see any of this drop off the cliff. I think the data supports that there is not a drop off the cliff. I think that kind of came about in that a lot of people that did jump in around the same time as me, because a lot of people did, I think they either jumped in not wanting to run it as a business, but as a hobby, and now seeing that you have to run it as a business if you want to succeed and put in the work. A lot of people just don't want to do that. And I think there's a lot of people who just thought it was going to be easy, because it was easy for those a couple of years. They thought it was going to be easy, and they're seeing that it's not. And then a lot of people just bought wrong. I mean, let's face it, I mentioned those bidding wars. People were paying and still are paying ridiculous prices where the numbers do not work. And eventually that's going to catch up with you. And I think that's what's happening with that cohort of people that did buy improperly, is that those numbers are catching up with them now, and they are no longer cash flowing. So I think you just had a lot of newer people who didn't understand what was going on. They thought it was going to always be this gravy train. And now that it's not, it's like the sky is falling, when in reality, it's really not.
Yeah. It's like the level of activity that's needed. It's just like any other business. And I kind of have to, a lot of times I'll make that clarification with people who are inquiring about getting into, let's say, the short-term rental space. It's active income. I mean, there's nothing, it's not a passive business. If anything, it's much more hands-on, because it's more of a hospitality business. It's a dual kind of a multi-component form of real estate. It's like, well, the real estate is one component. That's the buy and the acquisition and all that. But the operations is hospitality. I mean, that's its own business. Like, you have to manage that. It's not a long-term rental where, okay, well, cool, I'm going to sign this lease for January, and I'll come visit you the next January to sign a lease renewal. It's much more hands-on, especially when you're doing short-term stays where you've got new guests coming in every several days, or when it's jamming, depending on the season, depending on your property.
Right.
It can be like very, very frequent. So I think a lot of people just aren't prepared for that.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. And again, real estate is hyper-local. So of course, this may not apply to your market wherever you're listening, but it can definitely vary market to market for sure. Now, are you still is all your short-term rentals, are they all in the Smokies, or did you end up buying like stuff in Florida and whatnot? Where are you? Where are you living in Florida?
Yeah, I live in South Florida.
Okay.
And so, the Smokies is really where everything is. So the only properties I have in Florida are the ones from when I was buying, thinking that long-term rental mentality originally. So I have that quadplex still. And then I have a couple other single family homes, and I did convert one of the units in that quadplex into a short-term rental. So we got 3 terms and 1 short-term in that building. But otherwise my main focus has been on the Smokies, and it continues to be my main focus when it comes to the short-term rentals.
Right on. Well, I also want to kind of ask you too, tell me a little bit about the Fit Investor. What is that about?
So that's one of the things I started this year as well. It was the Fit Investor podcast. Our tagline is, we talk about how to be fit financially, physically, and faithfully, kind of trying to encourage entrepreneurs to lead a holistic life. So as you can imagine, it's a Christian-based podcast for successful entrepreneurs. And the genesis of it really came about And so I was also had the pleasure of being a part of the book Hospitable Hosts, Volume 2 that came out beginning of this year. And it was one of those things where, so once I got into the real estate investing and started kind of networking and going to meetups, and I'm very active in the various, especially like online groups and that type of thing. And it was just kind of the more I got into talking with other real estate investors, I started to see that there were a lot of Christians in that community, but it just wasn't really spoken about real openly. And so when I had the opportunity to be a part of that book project, I kind of just, I didn't know where it was going to go, but I was like, you know what, let me take this opportunity to give credit where credit's due and be open about my faith and speak about it in this chapter. And I wasn't sure how it was going to be received, but I said, whatever, it is what it is. Can't hide my faith here. So I made it like pointed in my chapter, talking about my story, to be very pointed and talking about Christ and talking about my process and prayer and all those things. And we had this launch party in Nashville at a big short-term rental conference earlier this year. And a couple of the other authors in that book had come up to me and just said, hey, thank you for doing that and being open about it. Like, we really need more of that. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, okay, that's nice. Like, I wasn't expecting that, but that's nice. And that was kind of what solidified things, because I'd been like toying with this idea of a podcast for a little while, but I was just like, I'll get to it sometime. And so when I got that feedback, I was like, okay, you know what? There is a need in this industry to have a platform that successful people can talk about their faith openly. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. So that was really the genesis behind it and the reason for wanting to get it out there, create that open forum for, again, successful entrepreneurs, not just in real estate, to talk about Christ openly and to encourage, again, that more holistic lifestyle. Because I'm sure, as you know, once you go down that entrepreneurial path, it's very easy to get lopsided. It's very easy to focus 100% on that business and everything else falls to the wayside. And it can be very, very destructive, personally and to your family, et cetera. And so I wanted to have it be an encouragement and a way for people to hear other people's success, not just on the business, but how did they make that balance, or how did they maintain that balance, and how did they get tips and tricks and practical things that they can do in their lives to try to bring back some balance.
Yeah, right on. Thank you for taking that initiative to step out and do that. I feel like there's been a kind of a movement of more people in the space that are being a little bit more forward on that front. So yeah, kudos to you. And for listeners, definitely go out and check out Cale's podcast as well, The Fit Investor. If that's something that's interesting to you, just want to check out kind of more people in that space and get some encouragement, I'm sure. Well, Cale, this is kind of the point of the show where we transition a little bit into what we call our fire round. Just a little bit more brief, little rapid fire questions. Is that something you're up for?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, right on. What is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or your own feature in Hospitable Hosts?
Right. So this may go out on a limb for some people, but it's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And it's like a sci-fi horror thing, but it's not. Like, it's basically the history of the central banking system, the Federal Reserve, and the financial elite, and kind of what that all is moving towards in this world. And I don't know. I hate the phrase conspiracy theories. I think it's a propaganda phrase for debunking a lot of truths. So I'll just say it is a book filled with fact and truth. And if you read it, you will have so much perspective as to what is going on in today's world. I mean, you could literally pull from the pages of this book exactly what is happening today. I mean, it's uncanny, frankly. And this book was written, I think, maybe 30 years ago or something like that. So it's a big book, 600 pages, I think. I've read it 3 times already. I'll probably read it another 3 times. I mean, it's extremely well written, and it's just an explosion of truth and facts and knowledge that'll help you understand what's going on in today's world.
Yep, it's definitely a great read. For those of you guys that have not heard of it or are familiar with it, definitely check it out and educate yourself on kind of how our financial system is set up. So yeah, it's a great read. All right. And next question, what would you consider your superpower is?
I'd have to say discipline. Everything I do, I'm extremely disciplined, sometimes to a fault. For better or worse, it's gotten me to where I am.
Yeah, no, and I think if you ask any successful entrepreneur, anybody really successful in life, I think it's a necessity, right? You want to be a great parent, you want to have great kids, guess what? You're going to have to be disciplined yourself in order to discipline them as well. So you're setting a great example. So yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you there. All right, next question. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned over your career thus far?
I think it's probably the power of relationships. And it's an interesting one. It's still something I'm constantly working on trying to get better at as well. I mean, I'm an introvert by nature and really a lone wolf type person as well. So the whole networking and fostering and encouraging relationships has not really come natural to me, honestly. So it's really been an intentional and focused effort and trying to really build upon that and improve that when it comes to the business. So understanding and seeing how much of an impact to the success or failure, frankly, of your business or your endeavors, relationships can be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Incredibly vital to any successful business and just any relationship in general. And you're just going to have to develop those along the way. So yeah, those of you guys that are listening to our episode, I would actually probably describe myself a lot in the same aspect, but understanding the value of relationships and how that works in business and in family relationships, personal relationships, and all that. I mean, it's incredibly vital. So yeah, get outside of your comfort zone. Cale's obviously outside of his comfort zone here. If he's a self-proclaimed introvert here, having a podcast and being an author and putting himself out there. So,
Yeah.
but it's you do it scared, right? So
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like I've been always one of those people that if you ask me to do something, whether or not if it's outside of my comfort zone, I'm still going to do it. Like I'm just going to do it just to prove to myself, I guess, that I can do it. So you got to get out of your comfort zone.
Yep. There you go. All right. Next question. For the busy working professional who's trying to work towards financial freedom, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I preach is you got to have a strong why, the reason that you're doing it, because you are going to have challenges that come across. And if you don't have that strong conviction and purpose that you're doing it, it's going to be too easy to throw in the towel. Or if things don't go the way you thought, like we were talking about earlier, it's going to be too easy to give up. So make sure you really have a strong conviction and a strong why that you can look to when things get tough, because they will get tough.
Yep. That's life. That is a given. So yeah, absolutely. That's very powerful, very poignant advice. Well, Cale, if our audience wants to reach out to you, they want to learn and connect with you, they want to build a relationship with you. What are the best ways to do that? Are you active on socials? Do you have a website? Do they just check out the podcast? What are kind of the best resources to get in touch with you?
Yeah, please do check out the podcast. Find it on Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. The Fit Investor. Same thing. We have a corresponding group on Facebook, The Fit Investor. But yeah, I'm very active especially within the short-term rental communities, investor communities on Facebook. You can just find me, Cale Delaney, there. Instagram, similar, Cale Delaney or Cale_Delaney, I think. You can find me there. And yeah, those are really the best spots to reach out to me, and happy to chat, happy to give people any tips or learn from other people as well.
Right. Awesome. Well, yeah, definitely make sure to check out Cale on any of his socials there. Check out the podcast. Make sure that you leave him a 5-star review and give him some feedback. Well, Cale, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I really enjoyed connecting with you. I wish you the best in all of your endeavors and more acquisitions and more reach through all the channels that you're pursuing and working on the balanced life. I absolutely agree. It's a very difficult thing to do unless you're very diligent about pursuing it. So yeah, but no, thanks so much for hopping on with us and sharing your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Aloha. Great episode with Cale Delaney with the Fit Investor. So obviously he shared his journey and he kind of went a different route than a lot of investors do, where they start, most investors, or I think a common story is started residential and kind of moved to the commercial end. He started with experience on the commercial side as a commercial broker and then transitioned over the years back into investing on the residential side. I mean, obviously has established a great real estate portfolio with short-term rentals, and that's been very successful for him in managing a sizable portfolio. And then something kind of common throughout his story was challenging the norms. This is something that I would encourage each and every one of you to do. I think this is a common theme. If you guys have been listeners of the show, don't be afraid to fail, right? It's the only way you're going to learn. Just jump in there, challenge the norms of what kind of traditional thinking is, and help to identify some of those opportunities and see what's a good fit for you, right? Your personality, because not everything is. There's a million and one different ways to make money in real estate. That's been shown time and time again. We've had a pretty wide range of guests here on the show. So yeah, I know you guys have seen that, but you got to find the fit that's right for you and your lifestyle. And that's something that Cale is big on, making sure that he can still manage his life, being a man of faith, being a man of family, and of course, finances on the investing side. So finding the right fit for you is going to be absolutely vital in factoring into your overall investment strategy and your investor career. Well, guys, if you guys are interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com. You can learn more about our business operations on the commercial side and business opportunities for multifamily commercial assets. We also have our local meetup here. So if you're in Honolulu and you want to connect with me, you want to connect with other members of our group, Make sure that you're joining us for our monthly meetups. You can find us on meetup.com, Bigger Pockets, joining our Facebook group, How to Live Multifamily and More. We meet up every month in person. So we'd love to meet you, come out, shake a hand, share a beverage and some conversation. So make plans to join us for our next meetup. Guys, please make sure that you're sharing the episode or sharing this show. If you guys are finding value in the podcast, we'd love to hear your feedback. So leave a 5-star review. We'd love to hear that. You can leave us a 1-star too, but just make sure that you let us know what you didn't like and how we can make it better. Because our goal is to provide you guys with the most amount of value that we possibly can. So the only way we can do that is if we're getting feedback from you. All right, guys. Well, I want to also make sure that we remind you, you can buy your tickets for the next upcoming Hawaii Millionaire Mindset Conference. And that's going to be happening back here on Oahu next year, July 10th through the 13th, back out at the Four Seasons over in Kolina. It's an amazing, amazing resort. You're going to have an incredible time there learning about business or learning about real estate. So make your plans to be there. Go check out the website now to get the best tickets on pricing. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today. We'll see you next time. Go out, take some action. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Go find your why, and get out there and make a difference in the world. All right. Aloha.